like we are just about online from
Yeah.
my end.
Yes, and I believe we're live. Hello, the world. Welcome to the next fortune installment of Live Free and Rant. We're still living free and we're still ranting, so you can bet your ass we're gonna still be here. I'm Joel Valenzuela, as I'm sure you can see the text says right there. And off to this side is my lovely co-host Chris Maidment. How's it going today, Chris?
Good, Joel. I'm glad you let people know how to pronounce your name because I'm sure you've had problems where people call you Joel all the time. Do you
Yeah,
get that
Joel
a
in the
lot?
hole with a vole. He has no soul. Yeah, I get that a lot, unfortunately. But yeah, it's
Well, happy John Stark Day to you. I'm
ooh,
not sure if you knew it is a legal holiday in New Hampshire, General John Stark Day.
yeah. And for those who are out of the loop because you hate freedom or whatnot, um, John Stark was the guy who coined the "live free or die" term that we've decided the state motto of New Hampshire that we've decided to name our fun little ranty show about. Except it's not an option like live free or die. It's we will live free. Damn it, and we will rant.
Yeah, and the important part of that quote, I think, is the second part: "Live
Mm-hmm.
free or die, for death is not the worst of evils."
Yes.
Meaning, back in that time, that was the American Revolution, and General John Stark was one of the great generals of the American Revolution in the Battle of Bennington specifically. But live free or die, for death is not the worst of evils, and specifically talking about the tyranny of the British Crown and the British coming to kill you. So, live free or die because it could be a lot worse, meaning tyranny, and we see that on a reoccurring basis. It seems like.
Yeah, and it's especially interesting today because no, not specifically just today, but in recent times there's been a lot of talk about the crazy virus pandemic going around and a lot of, let's be honest, trade-off between
What's
there's been
supposed
a
to be.
lot
Are
of
you?
stopping living free so you don't die. And that's kind of an interesting dichotomy. I don't think that it's actually there. I don't think that you need to stop living free. I don't think you need to surrender your freedoms in order to live. Come with me if you want to live, all that stuff. Oh, speaking of the
Excuse me.
COVIDs,
Yeah, no, I don't have. I have allergies and I have asthma. Everybody, calm. I did get a little worried the other day. I had a sore throat,
hmm
so I was asking people, hey, is that a symptom of the COVID or is it not? And I didn't end up with a fever. I didn't end up with malaise, so I'm pretty sure I don't have COVID still. So, anyways, I'm social distancing and there's nothing to worry about there, so we're good.
yeah, absolutely. Well, before we get into the meat of the topics of the day, if you notice the fancy new buttons we have up at the top, in the middle, of course, is the subscribe button. So wherever you're actually watching this, please subscribe. It's on two different YouTube channels: the Live Free and Rant one and the Desert Links. And if you're watching on someone like a Facebook feed, or a Facebook feed or a Twitter feed or wherever else this happens to be, also make sure to follow the key lovely person that you're seeing that on. And yeah, that's gonna be great. And of course, off to the left of the screen, which is there we go, is the crypto donation thing, which is Cointree or cointr.ee/ the Desert Links, which is my little moniker. If you have some of them crypto tokens, throw them that way. And on the other side is the Patreon, Live Free and Rant. So if you do like what we do and you like us to keep doing this, and you want Chris to be able to save up so he can actually afford the COVID vaccine, you might want to go subscribe and throw him a few bucks there. And once we get a few people going on that, once we get a nice, successful, faithful subscriber base, we will probably start looking into doing some perks for people that throw us some coin. Also, speaking of perks and such, if you do use Cointree to send some crypto our way, there's an option that you can actually write a message with a transaction. So it's not just some anonymous thing. It's just, you can actually just say, hey, great job, and then sign your thing, or just say, great job, but I wish you would stop, playing with your face so much, or whatever. Whatever. So,
Yeah, well, I'm never going to stop touching my face. So if you don't like me touching my face, you can go ahead and click off.
yeah,
I'm sure there's
stop
something
hitting
else you can watch right
yourself.
now.
Yeah, so that's what those three buttons are. I don't think you can click them. I can't figure that out. Who cares? It's easy you can figure out how to do this. So just draw attention to that. And then there is the first news item of the day. Of course, last time it didn't work so smoothly because I had all these in tabs. And this time I just had little screenshots in a viewer. So hopefully it moves a little smoother on my crappy computer here. So let's switch over. Oh, you want to tell me a little bit about this one, Chris?
So, Governor Sununu has, he's been doing a lot of executive action related to the COVID crisis in New Hampshire, to the dismay of many, but to the cheers of many. It's kind of like we talked about last week, Schrodinger's dictator. You know, at first Trump was bad because he was a dictator, and then all of a sudden he's not dictatory enough. Same with the Governor Sununu. A lot of Democrat legislative people were mad, they call him a dictator and all this stuff. And then he wasn't dictatory enough because he didn't go far enough with the shutdowns. And now all of a sudden he is too much of a dictator again. And he's trying to, we've received $1.25 billion in federal aid from the CARES Act. So he set up this committee, this advisory committee. It's called the Gopher, Goferr. Not like the animal, but he has cute little acronyms for all his committees. And they're going to advise him on how to spend the $1.25 billion in federal recovery money to help out the New Hampshire economy. Well, Democrats are all of a sudden big fans of the rule of law and the Constitution, and they're mad that he's going to spend it without legislative input. So they are suing him in Superior Court to stop him from spending the money. So I don't know what you feel about that.
Yeah.
I'm not a big fan of legislatures giving away the power of the purse. And under RSA 4, which is what all the emergency orders have been coming from, the governor has a broad power in New Hampshire to do executive emergency action. So the legislature gave away this power after 9/11, and now they're suing because they gave away the power. That's the way I read it.
Yeah, it's one of those things where when we're talking about politics and people being involved in politics, this is one of the reasons why people stay away. Let's be honest, is because it's just some complicated nonsense that no one really understands, that everyone's making a big deal about. And here's some of the comments we can see that a lot of people say, "Oh, this is great. It's great what you're doing. Screw those Democrats for politicizing a crisis." And I'd like to point out that this is literally the only reason you have crises, if you're a politician, is to politicize them. And so, it's not, again, politicians are not your friends. You might have a good one. You might have one who, probably won't, but you might have one who has your best interests at heart to a certain extent. You might have one you don't mind too much. But at the end of the day, they're doing their own thing, and it's not looking after you. And as we can see here, it's not exactly about the Constitution. It's not about who has the right authority to do what. It's not about any of that stuff. It's purely about, hey, there's all this money out there, and like we don't get any of it. Oh, that sucks. Or we don't get to figure out what to deal with it. And that's basically what it is. And so I don't really think that there's a good person or a bad person in this equation at all, as far as who's on the right side of the issue of, who should have the authority to spend this federal money, this and that. And, generally speaking, I do like more things to go through more layers of government. But I do think that this is quite an odd way of politicizing, like, basically just relief funds. It's pretty weird.
Yeah, so I mean, these are 100% federal funds. New Hampshire is a net payer into the federal system in terms of taxes. You look at it, if there was a Democrat governor right now who is in charge of the COVID relief, and they did the same exact thing, the Democrats that are currently suing Governor Sununu would be cheering one of their own for doing the same exact thing. So to me, it reeks of hypocrisy. Not to say that they're incorrect, because I think that they're correct that the legislature absolutely should have control of the purse strings. And that doesn't matter where the money is coming from. If the money is coming from the federal government or taxpayers in the state of New Hampshire, the legislature should be the one doling it out.
Yeah.
But they gave away this power 18 years ago after 9/11. So it's every time there is an emergency or a natural crisis or something along those lines, the legislature always reacts hastily. So hopefully when the legislature gets back in session, they'll re-examine some of RSA 4 that gives the governor out of this power, and maybe they can find a different way to reapportion that so that the legislature fulfills its constitutional duty and the governor can still move swiftly when it's necessary.
Yeah, that sounds pretty reasonable to me. Suing and stuff is a little weird in this time like this, but I'm not above trying to sue the government for doing shady things if that's what they're doing. It's just kind of odd, the people who are doing that. But in other news, there's a handy dandy graph here of the total cases recovered and deaths, 7-day average of new cases for the coronavirus here in the lovely state of New Hampshire. Now, if I'm just like looking, the blue is a total number of cases, correct?
The blue is the total number of cases since day one. We are up to, let me pull up the actual numbers on my end.
Yeah. And of course,
Total cases were up to 987, of which 239 have recovered and 23 have sadly passed away.
yeah, and of course that blue chart, it's just going up and up because it will never go down. Like it will only be flatten out maybe if there's no new cases at all, but it's not like how many new cases a day or whatever.
Correct. It's total cases, so that'll never go down. But I overlaid the yellow at the bottom there because that is the total recovered, and then that tiny little sliver at the bottom, not to take away from the 23 people that have lost, or the 23 families that have lost a loved one, but you can see on the scale. So the yellow subtracts from the blue, and so the remaining blue above the yellow there is active cases. Yellow is recovered, and red are the deceased at the bottom there. And then the green line is that 7-day moving average of new cases. And it's charted against a different axis, which is, we don't have, there was no point where we had 1,000 new cases in a day. This is charted against a different graph on the right side of the y-axis that you can't see on the screen right there. But if you're looking at the 7-day moving average, it sort of looks like we peaked about a week ago and are moving back down, but it's too early to draw that strict conclusion.
Yeah, it's pretty too early to tell, I think. I've seen some other graphs and such around the world that seem to indicate that there is a decreasing amount now, that it seems like things are not getting worse. They're the same, or possibly over the worst of it. Now, I hope that this means that people can go out and get back to work again, because if you would chart the economic devastation from all this, I'm pretty sure it would not be leveling off. I think things are getting worse. So, I don't know. What do you think about a tentative, let's just say May 4th, return to business as usual?
Well, I would love a even sooner return, or start to return to normalcy. May 4th is still 3 weeks away. Yeah, I don't see it. I wish, I want it. Businesses are hurting. People are hurting. We need to get people back to work. But it doesn't look like that is going to be likely. Governor Sununu was with NHPR this morning. He was asked about school returning this year, and he said he hasn't made a decision yet, but he said it doesn't look likely. I'll quote, "It doesn't look likely, to be honest. We're looking at a couple of different models and whether they would work, yada, yada, yada." He said, he's talking about virtual prom to close out the year. He said he just wants to make sure folks are safe, given that you had to, I stopped quoting, obviously. So it doesn't. He said it doesn't look like we're going back this year to school. And he specifically said at the opening of the question, he said, so when it comes to school, let's focus a little bit on June 1st. So it doesn't even sound like he's even remotely thinking about May 4th, because June 1st is 4 weeks after that. So it looks like we're still 6, 7 weeks out of at least a full normalcy. We'll have to see if we can start getting some bits and pieces back together, hopefully long before then. I don't know any small businesses that can survive 7 more weeks of being shut down.
Yeah, well, that's the other thing is it's not all about throwing people to school. In fact, I don't want them to ever go back. Go stay homeschool, homeschool for life. Well, you just go stay that from now on. But, and it's not also like let's just have a giant thronged get together on the deck of Murphy's Tap Room now and just all unflatten the curve again kind of thing. But it is about now, can you reasonably expect to all go back to business the way essential businesses, and of course we've gone over this before about what is essential and what isn't, and essentially every business is essential to someone. We kind of gone back to that, where can we just reopen things? Can we have hair salons go back to their thing and just super Lysol the crap out of everything, one person at a time in and then 6 feet apart in the waiting room or whatever, or just only one customer time in, whatever rules, whatever kind of practices you have to do to make this safe. I think it's about time for everyone to go back to work. And it's pretty sad because a lot of people have not left work. A lot of people have just kept on with their lives. A lot of businesses outside at 8 a.m. every morning, there's always some construction worker making a big old racket for my, lazy doesn't get out of bed early ass. And clearly they still have a job. Clearly construction crews, a lot of them still do. Clearly the Amazon, I was driving back from Bedford yesterday, and during the whole drive back, we saw dozens of Amazon Prime trucks on the highway in our under hour drive. Just so many Prime trucks. And that was Easter Sunday, right? So some businesses like, say, Amazon are just doing gangbusters. They're going all over the place. Some food delivery places, I'm thinking food is probably, prepared food is probably taking a hit in almost everywhere. But I'm sure there are some businesses that have managed to not only stay afloat there, but maybe even do better than they were before. Like a purely delivery business that didn't have any in-person traffic might be doing a lot better. Or, of course, they might also have some of their action cut in on in-person businesses that, But those people have still been working. It just, some people haven't. And it's not like the entire economy's dying kind of thing. A little bit, let's be honest. But it's also a thing of some people are being selectively bled out, basically, which is, it's really rough to say it like that, but it's kind of true.
Yeah, I mean, well, it seems like disproportionately small businesses are getting crushed, right?
Mm-hmm.
Amazon is doing, like you said, gangbusters. They're actually struggling to keep up enough workforce to supply everything that people want because disproportionately people are ordering online now. So those local mom and pop shops that you got, like Peterborough, where I live, there's a ton of local small businesses downtown that are just disproportionately getting crushed because they're forced to close and they don't have the infrastructure to switch over to an Amazon style, uh, you know, um, business model.
Mm-hmm.
Walmart's doing fine. Market Basket's doing fine. Target's doing fine. All of these places are still open. All of these big corporations can weather this storm, even if they're limiting the amount of customers inside, or, in the case of Vermont, they're roping off entire sections of the store that are deemed quote unquote non-essential, like planting a garden.
Yeah, well, that's
And then,
Vermont. I mean, come on, after Bernie, do you really expect anything good to come out of there? Sorry for
but
being
so
anyone
it's
who's
all
from the
these.
great state of Vermont who loves it and has a good time. I didn't mean to offend you. I just got to talk some smack.
Yeah, so I mean, you got all these small businesses that are just getting absolutely crushed. Uh, Restaurants are primarily small business owners, and
Mm-hmm.
they've been forcibly closed. People can't go into their restaurants and sit down and enjoy a beer, but they can order delivery. I mean, and a lot of people just aren't doing it. So they're going to the grocery store, they're buying a ton of food, And this has broader impacts reaching back up the supply chain. Um, milk milk producers are dumping hundreds of thousands of gallons of milk per day because they can't sell to restaurants and schools anymore. There's a Smithfield had to close one of their manufacturing shops because a bunch of people ended up testing positive for COVID. There's going to be huge impacts on the supply chain, going up. So there's in all those small businesses, like we said, that are getting disproportionately affected locally too. Um, so I don't know, from a public policy standpoint, trying to balance the health and safety of your citizens versus their economic interests. We've talked about this for weeks in a row now. I'm certainly glad I don't have to make those decisions, but I hope they're getting input from economic leaders and economists as well as the public health experts.
Yeah, I really think that this has got to be over soon, especially because now it seems like the worst part of things isn't the actual problems, it's the government. Always worse than whatever you can dream up, whatever natural disaster, the unnatural disaster that is government is always a little bit worse. And of course, there's some prime examples of that. For example, in Michigan. Now, Michigan governor is getting on a big backlash. I don't know how much of this you can read, but essentially, the stay-at-home order is not just applied to public gatherings, but private ones as well. Doesn't matter what the size are or the family ties. So they're going breaking up people in their own homes. They're now prohibited from visiting family or friends, with some exceptions providing care. So basically, you cannot visit your buddies or immediate family, even if it's just too many people. And so the order says all public and private gatherings of any number of people according among persons not part of a single household are prohibited. And of course, it places restrictions on what types of businesses may operate and in what capacity. And so, for example, and the Republican state majority leader, Mike Shirkey, I hope that's how you pronounce his name, otherwise it'd be weird. But it says, our governor is destroying our health by killing our livelihoods. And all. So there's a whole bunch of pushback against this person in particular for doing a lot of shady things, a lot of very strong-handed authoritarian things. And I mean, as if people weren't suffering enough, now we have to deal with that.
Well, Governor Whitmer is definitely auditioning to be vice presidential nominee for Joe Biden. There's no doubt about that. She has done some outlandish things. It seems like she's only doing it to get her name in the news repeatedly. And, unsurprisingly, half of what she's done is just absolutely insane. She was one of the first ones to ban hydroxychloroquine and azithromycin.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
And then she backtracked on that real quick. And now this, saying you can't go to your mother's house or your grandmother's house. Now, need to exercise reasonable caution for themselves and do their own assessments. For example, my wife's grandfather is over the age of 80. He's had several heart attacks. He would definitely be in that at-risk population if he were to contract this virus. So we have been staying away from their house. We didn't go there yesterday for Easter. This is the first time wife has never seen her family on Easter. But that was a decision that we made because it was the smartest decision in order to keep everybody healthy and safe. So everybody needs to be exercise, common sense and due caution on their own. That executive order that she issued, just like many of her executive orders, seems to have jumped the shark.
Yeah.
But the good news is she's not alone. The governor in Kentucky and then some police in Mississippi have gone just as crazy.
Let's go to Mississippi for that one. This is pretty crazy. And I love this title, The Holy War. Holy War has been unleashed in Mississippi after worshipers were fined $500 for attending a drive-in service. So
Yeah, so I don't see the problem with a drive-in service. I mean, you drive up, open your windows. It was a beautiful day up here yesterday. I can imagine it was nicer in Mississippi. It looks like it was pretty nice out from the pictures there. But go ahead and tell them what they did.
Yeah. So essentially, attorneys for Greenville's Temple Baptist Church are challenging the mayor's restrictions, particularly as a Kentucky judge overturned a similar ban for being unconstitutional. But yeah, so the legal action was launched after they were fined $500 for just driving up, doing a drive-in service for their regular church service. Now I don't know what it is. So first off, it makes something about religious services make people not want to do the same. And this is where you get into a crazy debate that I'm not about to have about what it is a religious service as essential as like buying groceries or something, or like is it more essential or is it completely frivolous? That's another completely. I ain't touching that one with a 10-foot pole, let me tell you. But it's funny how it seems like that's the one thing that has that has gotten everyone who's just like, oh yes, Mr. Government, I'm just not going to do anything that you don't like, has gotten them to be like, well, but we do need to worship, right? And they've gone out and done that, and I would say the drive-in way is a pretty safe way, but of course, anytime there's like a gathering or something like that, you can't have people living free and living without fear. Let's just be really brutal on that part, and that's why, that's why, in my humblest of opinions, they've been trying to crack down on these services because you can't have, yeah, everyone's got, the optics aren't good. The optics have to be everyone's cowered in, waiting for daddy government to do something. And if you're just out there living free, adapting to the new conditions in any kind of a way, then people start questioning government, and then just gotta smack them down. Also, maybe the revenue angle, right? A lot of people can't pay property taxes and other things. Just saying, like, maybe you just gotta start fining people.
Well, yeah, whether you think religious services are essential or not, we watched Easter service yesterday. It was live streamed right to our computer.
Mm-hmm.
The Bible says, "Where any two of you are gathered, I am there." So, that was our Easter service. We did it at home. We watched it on the computer. The kids watched it, and you know, didn't distract us too much, I guess. But in the First Amendment to the Bill of Rights, to the Constitution, they definitely included the right to peacefully assemble and the right of freedom of religion. So that's, I think, where most people are getting up in arms about this, because the First Amendment was very clear. Congress
Mm-hmm.
shall make no law infringing on the freedom of religion or the right to peacefully assemble. Now, if they were in a drive-in church service and they're not congregating, they're not within 6 feet of each other. I don't know the specifics of the service that was down there, but I don't understand where the government is deriving this authority. It
Mm-hmm.
seems like they were pretty peacefully assembled. It seems like they were there voluntarily. It seems like they were there exercising their right to the freedom of religion. So whether you or anyone or the government feels that that's essential or not essential, I don't know where they're deriving the authority to, shut that down or fine people that decided to participate in that.
Yeah, that's one of those things where a lot of people are saying now, well, temporary measures, temporary for this, but it's essentially the whole reason for America is that you've got to be basically the Ron Swanson permit. Like I get to do what I want. Like whatever you, it's and especially because of the religious underpinnings of America's founding principles of no, this is not a religious country. This is not a religion. It's not a religion enforcing country. But the entire thing behind it is we got the entire reason, for lack of a better term, the entire reason there's white people here is because they wanted to be able to worship without being restricted. They wanted to be able to have whatever religion they wanted and not have people get in the way. And the entire underpinning for the society we now live in today is that. And just the fact that you're telling people they can't do that one thing, it's like one of the worst optics in the world. But it's one of those kind of catch 22, like, damned if you do, damned if you don't things from government perspective, as I was saying, is on the one hand, look, rounding up churchgoers for just trying to worship on Easter is one of the worst, dumbest things you could do. And I think it's evil and tyrannical. It's just terrible. On the other hand, if you don't, then you look powerless because you can't do anything. This is this is like an act of God, as it were, if you call the virus. It is happening. There's things you can do to stop it, but you can't just centrally plan, just like, I'm going to do this and then everything's going to be better. It's like the free market with thousands and thousands of micro decisions a day by millions of people. That is what really takes care of everything. And this drive-in thing is especially good because it's showing how people manage to just solve a problem that the government didn't figure out. Like the government didn't say you may not congregate unless you are in your vehicles within so many of this and that and that. Like, no, they didn't think about this. They just said you can't congregate because that's all they could think about. Don't congregate, whatever. Everyone's gonna die if you congregate. The free market figured out how to congregate without killing people, and no, we can't have that. And of course, it's even worse to a certain extent in Kentucky, because in Kentucky, a whole bunch of people, and there's actually two things at play here, but a whole bunch of people went to Easter services, and they were, the police were recording all their license plates so they could get a mandatory 2-week quarantine. I believe this was thrown out by a judge, but they did it anyway. They recorded license plates of everyone going to services, and they're met with nails in the road. Now, I don't know how much of a tinfoil hat you can put on here. I am not putting a tinfoil hat in this case. I don't think it was government. I think it was Karens. Even worse than government sometimes.
Yes, the rise of Karens has been exponential.
The Karen boom.
I was at the Karen boom has been, that's really the curve that we need to flatten. It's tons of states are setting up these hotlines where you can call in and snitch on your neighbors for being outside, heaven forbid, or you can snitch on them for going to church or for voluntarily congregating with, family. The rise of the Karens needs to be flattened. That curve is very dangerous to our democracy and to our republic. And I bet it was, some people in the neighborhood that didn't want them to congregate at church who spread those nails. I don't think the government did it.
Yeah. I wouldn't put it past them, but I think they would have like those like tire ripper things. They have something a little bit more high tech than just scattering nails on the road, and they'd find a more like self-important way. That's a little too like, I hate to say it this way, that's a little bit too efficient of a way of just doing damage to people you don't like. And the government's not that efficient. They'd have to like roll out a barricade. They'd have to do something stupid that would be even worse.
Yeah, but I mean, back to the point though, they're writing down these license plates and they're going to enforce a mandatory 14-day quarantine on everybody that went to service there. And that's Governor Beshear of Kentucky who issued that order and is enforcing that. So, I mean, the whole thing is you look around the country and there's story after story after story that's just like this with, all right, so we get the point, right? We're supposed to social distance. We're not supposed to hang out in groups larger than 10, I think, is the official CDC guidance. But, in many cases, I saw a story out of San Francisco, I think it was the other day. 6 people went to take out food together, and then they sat on the hoods of their own car, and then they each got a $1,000 fine for doing that.
That's $6,000. I mean, the government could do a lot with that money, like, piss it away in a half second.
Well, yeah, a millisecond even.
Yeah, of course.
Massachusetts apparently has. The governor of Massachusetts, Charlie Baker, issued an executive order allowing doctors to share the address of anyone that tested positive for COVID-19, to share the address with police, so police can can check up on them, make sure they're quarantining properly, I guess. So it seems like there's a whole bunch of just
now
countrywide.
I don't want to I don't want to come down hard on anyone who's a nice, well-meaning person who happens to be a cop. But let me just say, across the board, the last thing that makes me feel safe and healthy is a knock on the door from the police. Now, if you do get a knock on the door from the police and there's someone else trying to kill you and they're trying to stop that person from killing you, arguably that will make you more safe. But still, when they show up, that's a sign of not safety, right? That's a sign that either they're coming to kick your ass for something or someone else is trying to hurt you and they're there to stop that person. And so if let's say you share, imagine like a poor guy gets tested with this and it's like, oh, goes home, feels bad, whatever. Then all of a sudden they have cops checking in on him all the time. It would not make me feel better at all. But more importantly, as you're going to the Karen boom, now there may or may not be a couple people from outside of the U.S. listening to this. I think I saw a couple in the live chat. A Karen, of course, is a female name. A Karen is a term used to describe, generally speaking, a middle-aged white suburban lady who likes to basically complain all the time, specifically wants to speak to the manager. That's the meme of it, is let me speak to your manager, and then has like the short kind of, haircut that like, and it's like the stereotype. But I don't think a Karen is any specific kind of a person. Definitely not only women. It's a Karen.
Definitely not only women.
Yeah.
No.
Okay. Yes, all yes.
So I worked
hashtag
in
yes, all
I worked
losers.
at Market Basket. Yeah, I worked at Market Basket for a decade, and I mean, I had this joke for a long time. It was a Karen was typically a middle-aged woman with 2 or 3 kids. She drove the soccer carpool. She had that short weave or bob or whatever that haircut is
The
called.
bob and weave.
And she would always want to speak to your manager, even if you were the manager. But no, it's definitely not limited to women. It's definitely not limited to a specific type of person. In this instance, we're talking about specifically the people that would call the police on somebody being outside for a jog or playing tennis. In my town, somebody posted on the local group page the other day. They said, oh my gosh, I just saw 4 people at Adams Park playing tennis and they weren't wearing masks, or, something along those lines. And it was like, oh, okay, well, they're playing tennis. I mean, how close do you get to one another while you're playing tennis?
I mean, if you get that close, you're doing tennis wrong. I'm not a tennis champion, but I know that's not how it's played, like right next to people. But it goes to that exact thing of, and this is what people don't understand. This is something that I have arguments with a lot of like libertarian anarchist people about, is they seem to think that government spooks are evil and everyone else isn't, sort of. And there's a lot of more nuance there. You don't realize that like some of the worst, most repressive regimes in the world have had a lot of popular support. That the idea of, oppressing people is something that is supported by a network of busybodies that just do not care. They don't care if it's in their best interest or not. They're just going to go cause some havoc. And so that's the principle behind the Karen is essentially like the self-policing kind of method of, basically if someone is doing anything that they don't like, they're going to go intrude in your daily life and do something about it. Now, I'd rather have someone like, here's the thing about the attitude behind the Karen, the ideology, the Karen ideology, as it were, is something I think is deeply disturbing, which is other people's actions that don't impact me are somehow my business, and somehow I should do anything to hurt these people who are doing stuff that I don't necessarily agree with myself. Now, that's pretty terrible. I do think that people who believe in liberty should take a very proactive approach in their communities in, making sure everything works well, and participating and taking care of the poor and standing up to people who are doing the wrong thing. But that's like for very limited types of things. Like if someone's doing something that you don't agree with, don't just like rat them out. Like just a lot of times just leave things alone. And we've had this whole Karen explosion. And what do we do about Karens, right? Because basically they do whatever they can to make life miserable. It would be nice to do a, of course, decentralized, right, whatever, a Karen list, Karen shame, just like, you know, in fact, if you had KarenShame.com, you could just post, here's the daily Karens and this person who's here. And of course, without the idea, there's a term doxing, which is basically exposing everyone's private information on the whole internet. That can be pretty dangerous, and that's really not good at all. And I don't think that's a good idea. But if you just say, this person, is basically a horrible tattletale for things that are none of her business or his business. Let's just make it into dude for now, or Carreno or whatever. There's none of his business. Maybe you should know who's the snitches in your community. And so, the whole right to refuse service to anyone kind of idea. I mean, why not refuse service to some Karens? Like, for example, if I had a coffee shop and all of a sudden my business model got destroyed and I had delivery people out everywhere trying to go hustle and get people their coffee to stay in business during this whole lockdown, I would be and someone told on or said, oh, they're not, I saw two people that weren't close enough and then got someone fined and in trouble or whatever that disrupted that thing. I'll be very mad. And when they came back to my business, I would just say, you see that door you came in? You might as well turn out and get right back out because I'm not serving you. Get out of my business. I just tell them, get out of here. I don't want to deal with you anymore. Or, a hair salon comes in and then, Karen, who's been like hurting your family or like got you ticketed because you went out for a run when you're back to work at your hair salon or whatever, get out. I'm not serving you. And then having a little like, wanted post or wanted, keep this person out of the business because they're terrible. And of course they can still go get their groceries places. They can still do whatever. But this whole like trying to hurt people for no good reason other than you just think their life better than them is a terrible human quality. And I don't think that the opposite, like arresting or hurting or fining or some kind of like nasty destructive action that they visit on other people, I don't think that it's fight fire with fire. I don't think you should hurt them as well. But there has to be some kind of a social consequence for being just a huge asshole. What do you think?
Well, I mean, that's a lot of the policy of the left is all about them knowing how to live your life better than you do, and them having all the answers. And that's what, Karen behavior basically is all about. Like you said, they know what you should be doing better than you know what you should be doing. So therefore, if you're not doing it their way, you're wrong. And if you're wrong, they're going to tell somebody and they're going to force their ideas onto your living. So if you're congregating in a group of 6, taking a walk up the street and you're closer together than 6 feet, well, they're going to call the police on you because you're not supposed to be closer than 6 feet. And they feel, the way I see it is that they feel personally victimized by people that are, not following as strictly as they are the social distancing guidelines because they feel like you're threatening their life. You're putting them in danger.
Yeah, everything
and
is
therefore they have a right to tell you.
If you think about it through that warped psychology. And that happens as well with people driving certain ways. Like that's a big, I'm sure that's like a big Karen kind of a thing to do. Is like you're driving through this neighborhood too quickly, which could be, if there's kids playing or whatever, that could definitely be a problem, right? And there's lots of ways where driving in a certain way could be a threat to someone's safety. Like if you see someone veering in and out of lines doing stuff like that, possibly drunk off their ass, which doesn't necessarily matter. What matters most is the way they drive as a result. That's something you might want to be like, all right, look, I'm going to do something to actually stop this person because they're about to hurt someone. This is not good. But if someone, like, say someone's driving a little faster than you'd like say you're going down the highway to 65, they're going 85, 88, they're driving very carefully but quickly, so leave them alone. What if someone's like, someone's riding a bike without a helmet which, I hate to say, no, I don't hate to say, I do it all the time. I'm not going to wear one of those stupid helmets. And if I die, if he dies, he dies. Like, I don't really go fast enough for that to really be a thing anyway. And it's like, leave me alone. What happens if someone's like, doing burnouts and doing like donuts in the parking lot around? As long as you don't need to be parking there, just leave them alone. Just generally speaking, you're going to be okay. And if someone is spazzing out on whatever, freaking out on the street, try to move to the other side. I don't think that's good that someone's on all kinds of drugs and is flailing around and screaming at people. That's not good. But don't beat the crap out of them. Move to the other side of the street first. If it starts becoming more of a problem, do something. It just, this whole idea that everyone has to live in a certain prescribed parameter is just nonsense. Like, and that's another thing is the homeless thing. It is basically illegal to become homeless in this country, yet so many people are. And I don't think it is good to be staying on private property and, pestering people on the streets and things like that. But at the same time, some people, and I this is a hard thing for me to learn, but some people, that's what they want to do. They just don't want to have a home. They don't want to have rent payments. They don't have to, be stuck down. They're just gypsies or wanderers, It's like whatever. The travelers, there's some traveling people some people that do it like consciously. Like they just say, I don't want a home. I want to travel. And they're not like rich enough to afford a big old Winnebago that they drive around, and then they have all this income stored up, and they have a permanent house and an address, so their bank still works, because you need a permanent address to have a bank account. If you don't have one, you can't have a bank account, right? So they haven't gone to that place in life where they can live the retiree traveling lifestyle, but they just still want to travel. They don't want a home. They just want to like do some work, scavenge a little here, just hang out under the moon, stars, and the sun, and just, and yet there's this like, you can't live that way. You can't do this. It's like, okay, well, maybe you can't live that way in my yard, right? Or maybe not down the busy street where, you just clogging stuff up with junk. But there should be a way for you to just live your life that I don't think is advisable, by the way. I don't think people should be homeless. I don't think that's good for people. But who cares what I think? Let's be honest. Who cares what I think?
Yeah, well, I mean, if it's not your life, then who are you to tell other people how they should live theirs, right? One summer, when I was in between, so I was doing winter rentals on the beach with a couple of my buddies from high school for a couple of years. And in between winters, I decided one summer that I wanted to live in a tent. Mm-hmm. I wanted to camp for the entire summer. I wasn't going to go set up a tent on the train tracks or anything like that. What I wanted to do was set up a tent for the entire summer at a state park campground, mm-hmm. Relatively inexpensive. It's like $20 a day, and they had hot showers, and it was safe. That's what I wanted. That's what I wanted to do. And I got told that under state law in New Hampshire and in Massachusetts, if you don't have your own facilities, so like in an RV that's hooked up to water and electricity, you cannot stay for longer than 14 days. And so I ended up working out a deal with the guy that ran this particular state park. There was one in Massachusetts that would let me do it. It was pretty close to where I was mm-hmm. working at the time. So I would go on Monday mornings. I'd get there at 5 a.m. I'd check in. I'd set up my tent. I'd go to work. And then on Friday morning, I would take everything down, throw it in my truck, and go back up to Maine. And I would have to stay at my father's house on the weekends because I couldn't stay in the campground for longer than 14 days at a time. So what ended up happening was I had to set up and break down, every week, because they had that rule. Now, I'm a clean person. I shower, I eat. I wasn't getting drunk and shooting shotguns at other people that wanted to camp there. So I didn't see the to me, I was still showering every day. There's a shower right across from the site that I was using. And of course I had to bounce around sites from time to time when they would get more booked, especially closer to holiday weekends. But if people want to live like that, which I did that summer, and I probably will hopefully never have to do that again. But it was fun. It was cheap. I got to be out in nature for the entire summer pretty much. I don't know. I didn't see the problem with it. So the government telling you that you can't live like that seems like an overreach in my view. Now, if you're setting up a tent on, the sidewalk in downtown Manchester, impairing everybody else's way of life, then I can see where they might have an interest in regulating that.
Yeah, of
But at a
course.
state park, it didn't make sense to me. So
Yeah, or in like an abandoned field, sort of in the middle of town, but not really. Or just like as long as, and like how good would it be if you could just, say you had some money, right? Not completely destitute, but you throw up a tent and you just say, hey, I'll pay like $2 a night to the person who owns this place if I just get to just get to throw up there, throw up the tent there for a while and just hang out as long as it's clean. Maybe take, put a deposit or whatever. There's so many laws that go against that. So, and one thing, for example, I believe in New Hampshire, you have to do, it's illegal for a tenant to require first, last month, and a deposit, and a security deposit. It has to be no more than double the rent payment. So you can ask first month and a deposit, but no last month. And
correct.
which I think that's a pretty reasonable thing to do, but I don't think it should be legislated. In fact, I have rented a place that did all three, but it was kind of off the books, so it's not like, and it worked out better because I didn't have to do some like proof of income because I was doing that weird living off of crypto nonsense, and like it's hard to prove that type of stuff. And it's just like, you know what, I'm not going anywhere. I'll just pay you enough deposits, and there you go. So this has been quite a big long ramble, but to wrap up that point, basically, say no to Karens. If you're a Karen, I feel sorry for you, but it's not too late to change. Embrace individuality. People can do whatever the hell they want as long as they aren't hurting other people. And please have a little bit more of a direct, save your ammo for big things. Have a little bit more of a direct concept of what hurting other people is. There's a lot, like, I'm sure you saw that video in New York City of that giant motorcycle gang, or I don't know, gang is the right word, but a bunch of people on motorcycles just flying down the streets, and then someone's like, excuse me, NYPD, tag them on Twitter. Like that's that's the most bitch move in the world. Isn't just ratting people out, it's tagging the police department on Twitter to it's just, that's like peak Karen right there. It's just like filming someone from your little balcony and just being like, and not just like filming it and then complaining about it and then saying you have called the police, and you do call the police, but just tag the police on Twitter in case they don't want to answer your call. Because that's the total thing is, what if the police are just like, yeah, listen, lady, we're doing bigger things than this. We can't, thank you for letting us know that people are driving around, but, no, I'm sorry, we're doing other things. Instead of that, you're making a big show by tagging them on Twitter, so then people get all this stuff, and why isn't the police doing anything about this? And it's
Well,
such
that's
nonsense.
the internet mobs and cancel culture at its finest, and that is just how 2020 seems to be going. Worse than 2019, worse than 2018, worse than
Hmm.
2017. Just wait until election season is really among us, and the internet mobs are just going to get so out of control that we'll have to deal with that as it comes. But in other election news, Bernie Sanders,
Oh yeah.
who was the he was a contender for the Democrat nomination for president of the United States, even though he's never actually been a Democrat.
Yeah.
Always been a Democrat socialist. He has
An
not
independent.
registered with the Democrat Party. He's a registered independent. He's an independent senator from Vermont, but he was running for the Democrat presidential nomination, and he dropped out last week. And I listened to his concession speech, if you will, when he dropped out, and he said, he didn't back Biden, and he
Hmm.
went on to say, "I want you, if you supported me, then still vote for me, because what we need to do is just rack up the most amount of delegates that we can, so that we can change the platform." more to our liking. So the guy isn't even a Democrat. He's not in the Democrat Party, but he wants to rack up all of these delegates so he can change the platform of the Democrat Party more towards democratic socialism, like Medicare for all and $15 minimum wage and all of that stuff that, free college, free everything.
Free
And so
everything
he said,
except for
keep
freedom.
except yeah. So keep giving me all your delegates and we'll just change the party from the inside.
Yeah,
That was his
I
plan.
saw a
And I didn't think
couple.
he was going to back Biden because I thought he learned that lesson in 2016 when he decided to endorse Hillary, and
Yeah.
all the Bernie bros were not very pleased with that because Hillary is more of a moderate neocon than a Democrat socialist. And he ended up doing the same thing today. He just dropped out, and he had already dropped out, and he decided that he's going to endorse Joe Biden. Now, my wife has a lot of left-leaning friends
I'm sorry.
from from college.
Oh,
A lot of college age kids
of
are
course.
left leaning, and that's fine. So one of her friends the other day posted on Facebook that he was never going to vote for Joe Biden, and he posted this whole long thing because he knew he was going to get skewered by all the orange man bad people. So he put on, I'm not going to vote for Biden, and yes, I know what that means. I know that it means reelecting Trump, but until the Democrats start listening to the Bernie wing of the party, I can't vote for more of the same. I have to vote for change. So I just can't vote for Biden. I don't know what his feeling is now today that Bernie decided to endorse Biden. So I'm going to have to follow up on that later and see if he posts a follow up.
Yeah.
But it's pretty interesting to see. I really want to know what that means for the Bernie supporters. Are they going to jump over and vote for Biden? Or are they going to stay home? Are they going to blank the top of the ticket? Or are they going to vote for Trump? It's all, or are they going to vote third party? Even Vermin Supreme
Ha. He's a good
seems
dude.
like a better choice for the Bernie bros
Yeah.
than Biden or Trump.
So to translate his consensus speech, I'm once again asking you to vote for the 1% of the 1% of the 1%. It's essentially what it translates to is just, vote for the powers that be. And let's be honest, how many people are going to love Bernie to death and then not do what he says to do? A few, but
Oh,
not,
of course.
but
Of
not,
course. Right.
most people are going to be, I would say I'd say at least half of his voters are going to go for Biden because, we can't defeat Trump. Oh, we'll figure it out later. There's going to be that. And I do think that the vast majority of the people who don't vote for Biden just aren't going to vote. There might be a couple that vote for Vermin Supreme or write in Bernie or do other things like that, but I don't know.
Well, the irony in the Bernie bros, right, is that they're more that they want these collectivist policies, like Medicare for all and $15 minimum wage and free college, free healthcare, free this, free that. They want all of those collectivist policies, but they're more rugged individualists than collectivists. They're saying, oh, Bernie wants us to vote for Biden because it means taking out orange man bad, but we're not going to do that. We're not going to listen to him because it's just more of the same. So they're voting like rugged individualists, but they're voting for collectivist policies, and that's the bitter irony in that. We're almost at an hour here, so we'll
Yeah.
just follow up
probably
with
wrap up
one
time.
last thing. We talked about how today is John Stark Day, a legal holiday in the state of New Hampshire, but we didn't touch on the Pine Tree Riot, which was arguably one of the first acts of the American Revolution. It was 248 years ago today, April 13th, 1772. If you don't know what the Pine Tree Riot is, I encourage you to read more about it. But let's just suffice it to say that New Hampshire has always been badass.
Yes, the sort of
They-
TLDR was the king of England wanted to basically tax all pine trees of a certain size for his navy, because for masting the ships. People basically told him to bugger off. Then they sent tax collectors, and they kind of tarred and feathered the tax collectors, sent them out of town, and then essentially everyone involved got a very small slap on the wrist, and that was kind of one of the first. Yeah, we no taxes. We're gonna do our own thing, kind of a thing. So look into the Pine Tree Riot. It's a good time.
Yeah, I'll put the Wikipedia link in my chat box over here on Facebook. It's a
Yeah.
great story. It is, peak New Hampshire. They send these sheriffs to come collect taxes on the King's Pine, as it was called,
Mm-hmm.
and they cut off the tails and the manes of the
Which is no
horses
good.
and beat the sheriffs upside down with pine,
Mm-hmm.
um, switches, pine switches. They beat them for hours with switches and then tied them to their horses and sent them on their way. So that was pretty fantastic. Um, 248 years ago today, April 13th.
Yeah, we're
So
gonna have to do
I
a
think
big
with that, we're
shindig in a
just
couple of
about
years.
wrapped up here, Joel, right?
Yeah, that's about the end of it. So once again, look at these beautiful buttons up at the top. Subscribe to whatever channel you see this on, so you keep getting it, get notifications and such. Especially on YouTube, you got to hit the little bell in the corner, and then hit subscribe to notifications, because just subscribing from the channel doesn't work. In fact, even under subscribed videos, I subscribed to the Reason Magazine's Reason TV many years ago, and their videos didn't show up and subscribed anymore at all. And because YouTube auto kind of unsubscribes you, so I had to unsubscribe and resubscribe, and then they popped up again. So make sure to subscribe and do the whole bell thingy. And of course, if you want to throw us a couple bucks, there's the Patreon off on the right, Live Free and Rant, and then there's the crypto thing through Cointree, cointr.ee/the desert links. Throw us a couple bucks, keep us happy, and we will see you next week. Have a good, relaxing week. Don't get too crazy out there, and I'll always make sure you stay free, and don't forget to rant.